The quiet hum of Earth's research station echoed through the dimly lit corridors. Scientists and engineers were busy working on various projects, but none of them expected the seismic shift that was about to happen. The discovery came from a deep space exploration mission that had been scanning distant star systems. A team led by Dr. Emily Carter, an experienced astrophysicist, had been studying unexplored regions of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: gather data, map uncharted space, and send back information to Earth. But what they found was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. It started with a faint signal. At first, the data seemed like a glitch, something that could easily be dismissed as interference. But Dr. Carter's instincts told her it was more than that. She ordered the team to analyze the data more carefully. As the hours passed, the signal became clearer and more consistent. The source: an enormous object hidden in the shadows of a nearby star system. The object was unlike anything known to humanity. So massive, it was hard to comprehend. It was a starship, but not just any starship. It was a planet-sized vessel. Dr. Carter's heart raced as she analyzed the data. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself. "A starship that size? It's not possible." But the readings were clear. The object was colossal, larger than anything humans had ever built, or even dreamed of building. The energy signatures coming from it were unlike any power source humanity had encountered before. It wasn't just one ship. It was a fleet of them, hidden away in a distant part of the galaxy, waiting to be discovered. These starships, spread out across space like forgotten titans, were ancient, probably older than humanity itself. Excitement spread throughout the research station. The news reached Earth within hours, and soon the world's governments were in a frenzy. What was this fleet? Who had built it? Why had it remained hidden for so long? And most importantly, was it a threat or a discovery that could change the future of humanity forever? Dr. Carter and her team quickly made plans to send a probe toward the location of the starships. As the probe launched into the void, the team watched in awe, waiting for it to send back images and data that could reveal the true nature of this discovery. They were about to uncover the greatest secret in human history. As the days passed, the excitement turned to dread. The closer the probe got to the fleet, the more strange things were happening. Power surges, electromagnetic disturbances, and sudden bursts of unknown energy made it clear that something was wrong. The starships were not dormant. They were alive. Or perhaps they had once been. But now, they seemed to be waiting for something. The deeper the team dug, the more mysterious it became. The technology of these ships was far beyond anything Earth had seen. But as the probe got closer, an eerie realization set in. What if this discovery wasn't a chance find? What if these ships were watching humanity, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? Dr. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that they were opening a door that should have remained shut, and what lay on the other side was something that might forever change the course of humanity. But they couldn't turn back now. The mystery of the planet-sized starships was far too important. The galaxy had secrets, and humanity was about to learn one of its greatest. But as they moved forward, a question lingered in the air. Were these ships a gift from a long-lost civilization? Or were they a harbinger of something far more dangerous? The probe's data had been sent back to Earth, and the entire world watched as humanity's greatest discovery unfolded. As Dr. Emily Carter and her team pored over the data, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The planet-sized starships were not only enormous in size, but their technology was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. These ships were ancient, built by a civilization long lost to the cosmos, but they were far more advanced than any Earth technology. Dr. Carter stood at the center of the research station, staring at the holographic images of the starships that filled the room. The ships were shaped like gigantic, twisting monoliths, their surfaces covered in intricate alien symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change. They were a marvel of engineering, designed to withstand the harshest conditions of space, yet they had remained dormant for millennia. buried in the shadow of a distant star. "What are they?" a voice asked from behind her. It was Captain Marcus Reed, the military liaison assigned to oversee the project. His expression was one of awe, but also of concern. "We've never seen anything like this before. These ships are beyond anything we could ever hope to build. But what do they want?" Dr. Carter's brow furrowed as she turned to face him. "I don't know, Marcus, but I'm starting to think we're dealing with something far more complex than just a relic of the past." The team's initial excitement over the discovery was beginning to shift into something else, something darker. They had been hoping to find an ancient relic that could give them insight into a long-forgotten race, perhaps even one that could help humanity advance in its own technology. But now, as the data continued to flood in, they realized there were hidden dangers in these starships, things they couldn't yet understand. As the research team worked tirelessly, they made a startling discovery. The ships weren't simply dormant. They were linked to one another by a network of energy channels that connected them like a massive, interconnected web. And these connections weren't just technological. They were somehow alive. Dr. Carter found herself staring at a series of energy signatures that were unlike any power source humanity had ever used. The ships seemed to pulse with energy, as if they were waiting for something to trigger their activation. And then the breakthrough came. In the heart of one of the starships, Dr. Carter's team found a hidden message. It was encoded in a language no human had ever seen before, but with the help of their AI systems, they managed to decipher it. The message was chilling. "Do not awaken the fleet. The war is not over." The words struck like a blow. The message had come from the starships themselves, or at least the remnants of the civilization that had once controlled them. It was a warning, but also a cryptic message. The war wasn't over. What war? Who had these ships fought? And why had they been left behind? As Dr. Carter stood in silence, trying to comprehend the implications of the message, Captain Reed's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've got a problem," he said, his tone urgent. "The fleet, it's moving." The screen in front of them flickered to life, and an image appeared, one of the massive planet-sized starships. But something had changed. The dormant ship that had once been inactive was now stirring. A faint hum filled the air as its engines slowly powered up. The other ships in the fleet began to react as well, as if they had sensed the awakening of their companion. "They're waking up," Dr. Carter said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But why now? Why after all this time?" The room was filled with a tense silence. No one had an answer, but everyone knew that the stakes had just changed. What had seemed like an incredible find, a glimpse into the past, was now turning into something much more dangerous. The starships weren't just dormant. They had been waiting for something or someone to activate them. And now they were awake. As the fleet of ancient ships powered up, a strange, unsettling signal was detected on the long-range scanners. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing minute. Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat as she realized what it was. The signal wasn't coming from Earth. It was coming from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, from a location that no one had ever mapped. The signal was alien, unlike anything they had ever encountered. "We need to find out what that signal is," Captain Reed said, his voice grim. "If these ships are waking up, and something is out there calling to them, then we need to know what we're dealing with." But there was no time to waste. The starships were fully awakened now, and their immense power was beginning to destabilize the surrounding space. The energy that had once been dormant surged through their systems, and the gravitational pull of the ships began to affect nearby planets. Space around them twisted as their engines hummed with increasing intensity. As the fleet of ships slowly began to move, heading toward the mysterious signal, Dr. Carter knew that humanity was on the brink of uncovering something far greater and far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The galaxy, it seemed, was not as empty as humanity had once thought. And the ancient starships, once thought to be forgotten relics, were about to reveal a much darker secret. As the hum of the massive planet-sized starships echoed through space, Dr. Emily Carter stood at the control center, watching in awe and dread. The fleet had fully awakened. Each of the ships, once dormant for eons, now radiated power, their systems coming to life with a quiet yet unmistakable force. The colossal vessels moved gracefully through the vast emptiness of space, their engines sparking to life with a brilliance that outshone the stars. The team at the research station had been given a front-row seat to history in the making. However, what was once a thrilling discovery now felt like a dangerous gamble. The ships were not simply technological marvels. They were ancient war machines, and their purpose, it seemed, had never been fully understood by the race that built them. "Where are they going?" Captain Marcus Reed asked, his voice heavy with concern. He stood beside Dr. Carter, studying the starship's movements on the holographic display. The fleet wasn't just drifting aimlessly. It was moving toward something that humanity couldn't yet comprehend. "The signal," Dr. Carter muttered, her eyes glued to the screen. "They're following the signal, the one we detected earlier. It's drawing them in." The mysterious signal, originating from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, had grown stronger and more consistent over the past few days. It was as if something, or someone, was calling the starships. But whatever it wasn't a beacon of hope. The message they had uncovered earlier, "Do not awaken the fleet. The war is not over," echoed in Dr. Carter's mind, sending a chill down her spine. They had awakened the fleet, and now they were heading toward an unknown threat. But what could it be? And why had these starships been left dormant for so long? The gravity of the situation became even more apparent when a new transmission was received. The communication was faint, but it was unmistakable. It wasn't a human signal. It was an alien message, and it was broadcast in a language that no one on Earth could understand. The transmission seemed to be repeating over and over, its meaning lost in a wave of static and distortion. But one thing was clear: the alien source was aware of the fleet's awakening. The starships continued their journey, accelerating toward the distant location from where the signal was emanating. They moved through the dark void of space with an eerie purpose. Despite humanity's best efforts to communicate with the ships, their artificial intelligence seemed to be operating independently, responding only to the signals they were receiving from deep space. "Should we stop them?" Captain Reed asked. His eyes narrowed. "What if we're making a huge mistake?" Dr. Carter shook her head. "We can't stop them. The ships have already made their decision, and I fear that what lies ahead is far too important for us to ignore." But as the fleet drew closer to the source of the signal, a deep unease settled over the crew. The stars around them seemed to grow dimmer, the vastness of space becoming more oppressive. It was as though the ships were heading into an area of space where no one had ever dared to go, an uncharted, forgotten corner of the universe. "We've mapped every star system near the signal's origin," Dr. Carter said, her voice quiet with concern. "There's nothing there, at least not according to our maps. It's a void. No planets, no stars, just an empty stretch of space. But the signal, it's coming from there." Suddenly, the ship's warning system blared to life, jolting everyone to attention. The starship's proximity sensors detected a massive gravitational anomaly in the distance. It wasn't just a small object. It was something enormous, something that shouldn't exist in a region of space like this. "Prepare for immediate deactivation of all non-essential systems," Captain Reed ordered. "We don't know what we're heading into." As the fleet approached the anomaly, it became clear this wasn't a normal gravitational disturbance. The anomaly was growing larger with each passing moment, pulling everything toward it. The starship's automated systems engaged full power to resist the gravitational pull, but it was clear that whatever lay ahead was pulling them in. They were entering a space where the laws of physics themselves seemed to warp and bend. "Is this it?" Dr. Carter whispered to herself. "Is this what the warning was about?" As they crossed the threshold into the gravitational anomaly, a massive object finally came into view. It was a ship unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was massive, and its structure seemed to ripple in and out of space, as though it existed both in this dimension and beyond it. Its surface shimmered with an unnatural glow, and strange symbols covered its body, symbols that matched those found on the ancient starships. The teen watched in stunned silence. This was no ordinary alien ship. It was the heart of the enemy, the source of the signal, and the reason the starships had been awoken. "It's a weapon," Dr. Carter said, her voice trembling with realization. "A weapon of unimaginable power. The war they spoke of, it's still happening, and we're in the middle of it." The anomaly began to pulse with energy, and the massive ship began to move, its enormous size dwarfing the planet-sized starships. It was clear now. The starships were not the aggressors. They were the last remnants of a dying war. And they were all heading straight toward humanity's final confrontation. The fleet had been awakened not to save humanity, but to face an enemy that was about to return in full force. The real battle was about to begin. The moment the alien ship materialized before the fleet, time seemed to slow down. The colossal ship's eerie glow filled the space around them, casting a shadow that seemed to stretch across the galaxy. It was like staring into the heart of the unknown, a force of nature so alien and powerful that humanity could scarcely comprehend it. It was the size of a small moon, with surface features that seemed to ripple and shimmer, making it appear as if it was not entirely a part of this reality. Dr. Emily Carter's heart raced as she studied the readings. "This ship, it's not just another alien vessel," she murmured, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and dread. "It's something far worse." Captain Marcus Reed stared at the massive ship, his face hard with determination. "What are we dealing with, Emily? What is it?" "I don't know," Dr. Carter replied, her eyes glued to the holographic display. "But the energy levels are off the charts. This ship isn't just a warship. It's a weapon designed for total annihilation." The alien ship began to move, its movements slow but deliberate. The gravitational anomaly around it pulsed with each shift, growing stronger as the ship drew closer to the fleet. Dr. Carter watched as the ancient starships, which had once been dormant, now seemed to respond in unison. Their weapons systems powered up, their engines roaring to life, as they began to position themselves in a defensive formation around the alien ship. They weren't just reacting. They were preparing for something they had been programmed to do eons ago. "This is it," Captain Reed said, his voice grim. "The war, it's back. The ships we've awakened were never meant to defend us. They were built to fight this." The realization hit like a lightning bolt. The fleet of planet-sized starships wasn't some forgotten relic. They were the last remnants of an ancient war, a war between two galactic civilizations, and the enemy ship before them was the force that had once driven them into hiding. The ship's design was familiar to the starships, but with one major difference: it was far more advanced, far more destructive. "We've made a terrible mistake," Dr. Carter whispered, her voice thick with fear. "This ship, it's not here to help us. It's here to finish what it started." The fleet's sensors picked up something else, a dark pulse of energy emanating from the alien ship. It wasn't just a communication signal. It was a warning, a call to arms. The enemy ship had detected the fleet and had begun to prepare for combat. The ancient warships were moving into formation, their weapons targeting the enemy vessel. But as the fleet moved closer to the massive alien ship, something strange began to happen. The starship's weapons fired in unison, but the alien ship seemed to absorb the energy, as if it were one with the fabric of space itself. It wasn't simply a ship. It was a force, a living weapon that had transcended the boundaries of technology and reality. "We can't fight that thing," Dr. Carter said, her voice full of dread. "Whatever it is, we're outmatched." Captain Reed clenched his fists. "We don't have a choice. If that thing reaches Earth, it will wipe us out. We need to find a way to stop it, or we won't have a planet to protect. The fleet, which had once been humanity's last hope, now seemed more like a fragile line of defense. These ancient ships, though powerful, were outclassed by the enemy before them. But they were humanity's only hope. They had to hold the line. The alien ship emitted a low, rumbling sound, like the growl of some ancient beast, and in that moment, the crew realized that this was no ordinary vessel. It was alive, in a way that defied all known science. It was a remnant of an ancient, ruthless race, one that had once ruled the stars with an iron fist. The starships that humanity had awakened were not mere protectors. They were remnants of a lost war, a last defense against an enemy that would stop at nothing to destroy all in its path. Captain Reed barked orders to the fleet's commanders. Prepare for battle. Get the ships into position. We'll hold them off for as long as we can. But deep down, Reed knew the truth. They were outgunned. They had the firepower, but they lacked the advanced technology to match the alien ship's otherworldly abilities. The enemy's ship was not just a war machine. It was a living force, capable of manipulating space and time itself. And that made it an almost unbeatable opponent. The fleet moved into position, readying their weapons. The massive starships aligned themselves in a defensive perimeter, but even as they prepared to engage, it was clear that the balance of power was shifting. The alien ship, like a dark shadow in space, loomed larger with each passing second, its presence almost suffocating in its scale and power. "This is it," Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with resolve. "We've awoken something far bigger than we ever imagined. But now we have no choice. We must fight. For humanity. For every living being in this galaxy." As the two fleets prepared to clash, Dr. Carter stared out at the dark ship looming in front of them. It was the final battle. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Would humanity's last stand be enough to stop the return of this ancient enemy? Or would the galaxy fall under the shadow of a long-forgotten war? The battle for the future had begun. The silence of space was shattered by the first deafening blast. Humanity's fleet fired its massive weapons, a concentrated burst of energy aimed at the dark alien ship that loomed before them like a predatory beast. The force of the explosion rocked the ships, but as the light from the blast faded, something impossible happened. The alien ship didn't even flinch. "The weapons, they're not working," shouted Lieutenant Sarah Holmes, staring at the screens in disbelief. "We're hitting it with everything we've got, but it's not even slowing down." Captain Reed stood frozen, his gaze locked on the enemy vessel. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "We've designed these weapons to take down entire fleets. Why isn't it working?" But there was no time to ponder the question. The alien ship, which had once appeared to be dormant, was now reacting with terrifying speed. A strange, rippling energy wave pulsed from its core, expanding outward like an invisible hand. Before the fleet could respond, the wave hit, knocking several of the planet-sized starships off course. "We've lost contact with Starship Phoenix," screamed a communications officer. "They're drifting into the event horizon of a nearby black hole." Panic spread like wildfire through the fleet. The enemy ship wasn't just technologically superior. It seemed to be controlling the very fabric of space around them. The gravitational wave had unleashed distorted space, warping reality itself, and sending entire ships careening out of control. Dr. Carter, standing beside Captain Reed, gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles turning white. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we've ever encountered," she said, her voice trembling. "It's almost as if the ship is alive. It's bending space itself to its will. How do we stop something like that?" Captain Reed's voice was laced with desperation. The alien ship was proving to be not just an opponent, but a force of nature that humanity's technology couldn't touch. The situation was growing direr by the second. As the fleet regrouped, Captain Reed knew they had to come up with something. They couldn't win a direct confrontation. Not like this. But humanity's survival depended on them finding a weakness, anything to turn the tide. "Activate the phase shifters," Reed ordered. "It's our only hope." The phase shifters were experimental technology, developed in secret by Earth's best minds. They were designed to create temporary anomalies in space, allowing a ship to phase in and out of dimensions to avoid incoming attacks. It was risky, untested, and there was no guarantee it would work. But it was their best shot. The massive starships began to hum as the phase shifters activated, and the space around them seemed to shimmer and distort. For a brief moment, it looked as though the ships would slip out of existence. But then the impossible happened. The alien ship's rippling energy field expanded once more, and instead of simply pushing the fleet away, it clamped down, surrounding each ship in an inescapable gravitational grip. "We're stuck." Lieutenant Holmes screamed as her console flashed red. "It's pulling us in. Get the phase shifters back online. Now." Reed barked, his heart pounding in his chest. The alien ship responded with terrifying speed. A series of beams shot out from its surface, striking several ships at once, piercing through their shields like they were paper. The first wave of attacks devastated the fleet. Entire starships were obliterated in a single hit, their massive forms disintegrating into particles. Dr. Carter gasped. "They're not just fighting us. They're trying to erase us." The situation was clear now. This was no ordinary battle. The alien force wasn't interested in simply defeating humanity. They wanted to annihilate every trace of their existence, wipe them from the galaxy entirely. And it was succeeding. But despite the overwhelming odds, there was one glimmer of hope. As the fleet continued to regroup, Captain Reed spotted something unusual. Among the destroyed ships, the ancient starships, once dormant and seemingly unresponsive, were now starting to power up on their own. "They're fighting back," Reed shouted, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and awe. The ancient ships, driven by whatever unknown force had awoken them, began to launch their own attacks. Massive beams of energy, unlike anything seen before, lanced out from their hulls. For the first time in this battle, the alien ship recoiled slightly, as if it were caught off guard. "Is it working?" Dr. Carter asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. "It's holding it back," Reed said, his voice filled with a hope that had been all but lost. "But we can't keep this up forever. We need more power, more firepower. We need something more." And just as the last of the ancient ships powered up, the fleet's sensors picked up a startling discovery: a hidden weakness in the alien ship's shield. The same rippling energy field that had been protecting the ship had a small vulnerability, an opening, a blind spot in its defenses. "We can hit it," Dr. Carter said, a spark of realization in her eyes. "But only once. It's our one shot." Reed's heart raced. "Get the fleet into position. We have to strike together. All of us at once." The remaining ships began to align, their weapons charged and ready for the final offensive. Humanity's hope rested on this last-ditch effort. The alien ship was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. And now, humanity had discovered a way to strike back. The countdown began, a final desperate strike to save everything. "Target locked," a voice echoed through the command room. "Fire," Reed ordered, his voice filled with determination. The combined firepower of humanity's fleet surged toward the weak point in the alien ship's shields. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then, with a deafening roar, the weapons discharged, sending a concentrated blast of energy straight into the heart of the enemy ship. The alien vessel buckled under the force of the attack. Its shields flickered, and then, with an explosion that shook the very fabric of space, the ship erupted in a burst of brilliant light. The battle was far from over, but humanity had just taken the first step in turning the tide. The aftermath of the blast was a surreal moment of quiet. The once imposing alien ship, now partially cracked and glowing with the remnants of energy, hung motionless in space. For a split second, it seemed as if victory was within reach. The crew of humanity's fleet held their breath, watching as the rippling energy shields of the alien vessel flickered, desperately trying to maintain their defenses. But then, as if to mock their hope, the ship began to rebuild itself. The cracks in its surface shimmered and healed, its dark energy shields regaining full strength. It was as if the alien ship was absorbing the very energy of the attack and turning it into fuel for a greater, more devastating response. "Captain, it's regenerating," shouted Lieutenant Holmes from the tactical console. "We've only scratched the surface. We can't keep this up much longer." Captain Reed's jaw tightened as he scanned the unfolding chaos. The initial strike had shown promise, but the reality of facing an ancient warship that could manipulate energy and space at will was setting in. Humanity had struck a blow, but they hadn't defeated it. "We need a new strategy," Reed said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to Dr. Carter, who was still monitoring the energy fluctuations on her screen. "Any ideas?" Dr. Carter, who had spent the last several hours studying the alien vessel's power systems, stared intently at the data. The alien ship's regenerative abilities were impressive, but there was a flaw, a slight imbalance in its energy flow. The ship was powerful, but it relied on a delicate system of energy channels to maintain its form and function. A disruption to that flow could destabilize its entire structure. "There is a weak point," Dr. Carter said, her voice laced with both urgency and excitement. "If we target the ship's core energy conduits, we can disrupt the regenerative process. We need to break its energy flow, or it will just keep coming back." Reed's eyes narrowed. "How do we do that?" "We can't get close enough for a direct hit without being torn apart." "We don't need to get close," Dr. Carter replied. "The phase shifters. The ships can phase in and out of different dimensions. We use them to bypass the shields and strike from the inside." Reed's mind raced. It was a risky strategy, but at this point, there were few options left. "Are you sure this will work?" "No, but it's the only chance we got," Dr. Carter said. "If we don't take it, this ship will destroy us all." "All right," Reed said, his voice filled with resolve. "Get the phase shifters ready. We're going in." The fleet's remaining ships began to charge their phase shifters, preparing for a maneuver that was as dangerous as it was necessary. Humanity had no idea what they would find once they phased into the alien ship. The ship's energy fields were unlike anything they had encountered before. It was a maze of dark energy that defied the laws of physics, and there was no guarantee the fleet would survive the attempt. As the fleet's ships shifted out of their dimension, the surroundings twisted and warped. Time itself seemed to slow, and the stars around them became streaks of light, like the universe itself was tearing apart. The crew members felt a strange sensation as their ships phased in and out of existence. It was disorienting, even terrifying. "Status report," Reed barked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We're in," Lieutenant Holmes replied, her fingers flying over her console. "We've phased inside the alien ship's energy field, but I'm reading multiple anomalies. The ship's interior doesn't obey normal space-time laws. It's alive, almost like a living organism." "Keep moving," Reed said. "We don't have much time. We need to find those conduits." The fleet navigated through the strange interior of the alien vessel, passing through walls that seemed to breathe, and corridors that curved and twisted like organic matter. It was like flying through a massive, alien body, a ship that was more than just metal and circuitry. It was as if the ship itself was a living, breathing creature. As they traveled deeper into the heart of the ship, the energy fields around them grew more intense. The ship seemed to sense their presence, and the very air vibrated with a low, threatening hum. The fleet's sensors picked up sudden bursts of hostile energy, shooting from the ship's walls in an attempt to push the invaders away. But the phase shifters allowed the ships to dodge these attacks, phasing in and out of danger as they continued on their mission. "There, I see the conduit," Dr. Carter shouted, pointing to a glowing energy core that pulsed like a beating heart at the center of the ship. Reed's pulse quickened as the ships moved into position. This was it, the moment of truth. They had found the heart of the alien ship, the source of its regenerative power. Now they needed to destroy it before the enemy could rebuild itself once again. "Lock on all weapons," Reed commanded. "Prepare to fire on my mark." The fleet's ships, in perfect synchrony, aligned their weapons toward the energy core. The tension was palpable, the countdown to the final strike imminent. The fate of humanity rested on their ability to take down the core before the alien ship's defenses could retaliate. As the weapons charged, Reed could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. If they failed, it would be the end. But if they succeeded, "Fire!" Reed shouted. A concentrated barrage of energy bolts shot from every ship, striking the alien core with terrifying force. The core, glowing with an unnatural light, began to crack and fracture under the onslaught. And then, with a violent burst, the energy conduits began to rupture, sending waves of unstable energy through the ship's entire structure. The alien warship trembled violently, its once unshakable shields flickering and sputtering as the core collapsed. The ship's walls began to crack open, and for the first time, the fleet saw the true scale of the destruction they had caused. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was dying. "We did it," Dr. Carter whispered in awe. But even as the alien warship began to falter, it unleashed one final, desperate counterattack. The remaining energy from the dying ship surged outward in a massive shockwave, sending humanity's fleet into chaos once again. The alien warship, its once imposing structure now riddled with cracks and fractures, began to buckle under the pressure of humanity's relentless assault. Its core energy conduits, overloaded and unstable, sparked violently with energy, sending shockwaves of electromagnetic force through the varied fabric of space itself. Yet despite this devastation, the ship was far from defeated. "Brace for impact," Captain Reed shouted as the last remnants of the alien ship's power surged toward them, like the death throes of a dying beast. The crew's hands gripped their consoles, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. The shattered enemy ship was releasing everything it had in a final, vengeful attempt to annihilate humanity's fleet. Outside, the stars flickered and distorted as the alien vessel's final weapon, a massive shockwave of dark energy, shot toward the fleet. It was as if the ship's death throes were now a weapon in itself. The shockwave was all-consuming, moving faster than any ship could outrun. If it hit, the remaining human forces would be wiped out in an instant. Reed's mind raced. They couldn't escape it. There was nowhere to run. The phase shifters, even at full power, wouldn't save them. This was it. The final attack. Humanity's fate had come down to this one last desperate choice. "Deploy the last of the gravity bombs," Reed ordered, his voice steady but filled with urgency. These bombs were their final weapon, designed to destabilize the enemy's gravitational field. If used correctly, they could exploit the weaknesses in the alien ship's structure, taking down what was left of its defenses. Lieutenant Holmes's fingers flew across her console. "Gravity bombs, armed and ready, Captain." As the countdown began, Reed turned to Dr. Carter, who had been the backbone of their strategy since the beginning. "This is it. We need to hit the enemy ship's weak point before the shockwave reaches us." "I know," Dr. Carter replied, her face determined. "We'll need to time it perfectly. If we miss, everything is lost." The tension was unbearable. Reed could hear the countdown echoing through the command center. 5, 4, 3. The shockwave was closing in on them, a tidal wave of dark energy that seemed destined to sweep them all away. 2, 1. The bombs were released. There was no turning back now. Humanity's last hope was tied to these small, seemingly insignificant devices, but their power was immense. If they detonated in the right spot, they could tear apart the remaining core of the alien warship and stop it from unleashing the shockwave. The gravity bombs plunged into the heart of the alien ship. For a moment, there was nothing but the deafening silence of space, broken only by the sound of Reed's breath in the quiet command center. Then the explosions detonated, sending shockwaves through the alien ship. The force was so immense, it felt as though the very fabric of space itself had cracked. The shockwave, now in reverse, began to collapse in on itself, ripping the alien ship apart from the inside. "We did it," shouted Holmes, her voice filled with disbelief and awe. But the explosion was far from over. The energy ripples from the blast began to spread, and the alien ship, unable to withstand the force, started to break apart in a series of fiery eruptions. The remaining weapons fire from the alien warship was silenced, the once indestructible vessel now in ruins. The massive shockwave of dark energy, which had been moments away from wiping out humanity's fleet, dissipated like smoke in the wind. For the first time in hours, the fleet was free. The enemy ship was gone. "We did it," Dr. Carter whispered, still staring at the view screen in stunned silence. "We survived." Reed allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew the battle wasn't over. The fight for the galaxy wasn't just about defeating a single ship. The alien race, whose warship had been destroyed, was only one part of a much larger force. They had won the day, but the war was far from over. "We've won the battle," Captain Reed said, his voice steady once more. "But this war is just beginning." The camera panned out from the wreckage of the once mighty alien warship, now nothing more than a shattered mass drifting through the void. The fleet's remaining ships hovered in place, their energy low but their spirits high. Humanity had delivered the final blow to the alien menace. But as Captain Reed stared at the destruction before him, one thought lingered in his mind. If the enemy could build a ship like this, what else was out there waiting? What new horrors lay in the darkness of space? Humanity had defended itself this time, but at what cost? The galaxy was vast, and the threat was far from over. The battle for survival had only just begun.